Okay, so an important quote. I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding in even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. That's a quote from your local GP describing when they first met you.
Thanks for that.
But it's a striking coincidence that it's also a quote from Dr. Loomis, the psychiatrist in charge of the patient, the famous patient, Michael Myers, the legendary killer from the film Halloween, 1978, directed by John Carpenter.
Yeah.
So, as a young person, you've watched this film, which, if we look at the difference in years between the time of its premiere and now, and compare it to your lifespan, then this film would be 42 Megan Tremethicks old.
Would it?
Yeah, I think so.
That makes no sense.
And so we come to the important question, which is what you thought of Halloween.
Yes.
And so let me ask, what were your first, just general impressions, nothing too specific, on Halloween? What did you think of it?
I really liked it. It was quite a slow build for a slasher film, but I personally really liked that because I felt like I had time to kind of, the characters really grew on me, and then I felt really sad when they all died.
Right, so there you go. That was our review for Halloween.
Done.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Please like, share, and subscribe. So, my quote from Dr. Loomis, right, is an important one. We start Halloween with the idea that Michael Myers is a human and a mental patient who we see at the beginning of the story escapes. Right? He is the personification at that point of human evil. But whilst Dr. Loomis speaks in often apocalyptic tones about Michael Myers and about the evil he manifests, others around him don't consider him that. They don't consider the threat Michael Myers poses, or they don't consider him to be anything less than human. But Dr. Loomis has this kind of bigger, much more apocalyptic take on him. And during the course of the film, and all the actions that Michael Myers takes, we'll actually go on a journey in which Dr. Loomis is vindicated for his belief, not just in the danger that Michael Myers presents, but that he is, and now I found the word I meant to use earlier, the embodiment of evil. He transitions between a mortal manifestation of evil into a supernatural manifestation of evil, something which only takes place at the very end of the film, where after many attempts at killing Michael Myers with a knitting needle and a knife, we see beyond any doubt that he should be killed by 5 shots.
Yeah, a gun.
And then he is, gone, vanishing into the night. That marks the final vindication and fulfillment of Dr. Loomis's kind of apocalyptic vindication. And this parallels with another aspect. Can you guess what that is? Something suggestive of the quasi or supernatural aspects of Michael Myers? What do the characters talk about in
Oh,
Halloween?
they're constantly saying there's no such thing as the boogeyman. There's no such thing as the boogeyman. Well, guess what? There is.
Exactly. And it's an excellent mark of the script that the question of existence for the so-called boogeyman, and by that we is a more child-like metaphor for evil, effectively, or supernatural evil, is questioned, and the characters are skeptical about. The power of Halloween is that it will say the boogeyman is real. But very importantly, by telling us all along in an attempt to reassure us, which is when we see the character of Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, telling the children to reassure them that the boogeyman isn't real. We're told time and time again the boogeyman isn't real. And we're told time and time again that Michael Myers is a human, and not anything more, not evil. He will be evil. He is supernatural, and the boogeyman is real. And at that precise moment, when Michael Myers vanishes before our eyes, we might not see him, but we do hear him in the last shots of Halloween, in which we see dark rooms, very much like those we live in, accompanied by the horrific sound of his heavy breathing. Evil is with us, wherever we may hide or reside. And at that moment, we saw the birth of a legend, a horror legend, a legendary character, and a new intellectual property, and something that became a pop cultural phenomenon. You said you thought it was quite slow for a slasher, but of course, in the opinion of many, and I think this is the case, you can challenge this assertion in the comments, Halloween is the original slasher film, and it is what created and started that whole subgenre. So when you consider that it might be slow for a slasher film, it is in fact
the quintessential.
Yeah, and therefore it's the other slasher films
that
that
too
are
fast.
Well, in the commercial exploitation of that subgenre as it was created, the exploitation focused on the primary commercial elements as they saw it, which was the deaths and the spectacle of those deaths and the titillation of the softcore sex scenes. These are they're present in Halloween. We have some boobs and we have some deaths, but they're not especially gratuitous.
No.
And but their presence was what those who produced slasher films afterwards considered to be the best commercial elements to guarantee a teenage audience.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so they would become ever more fixated on those things. It's not to say that's a bad thing, but isn't it great though when you don't have to rely on those crutches to tell an engaging story that also uses the slasher format, and that's through suspense.
Absolutely.
What did you think of the atmosphere of suspense that John Carpenter creates for Halloween?
Oh, it was great, particularly at the beginning when it's kind of, after the opening where Michael Myers is taken, but when we see this like suburban, like these houses, and it looks, it's daylight, it looks perfectly lovely really, but there's this really creepy music playing and the cinematography is quite slow and it just is really unsettling, and that could be our homes. And they did a great job at making you feel unsafe in your own neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, John Carpenter looks at an environment that is quintessentially an aspirational middle-class America as it was for the 70s, and that is the suburbs. The white picket fence, that's the dream, and seeks to deconstruct it by bringing terror and horror to it. Now, if you were affluent enough to live in such an environment at the time, the film would be nightmarish. But you didn't have to be rich enough to live in that environment for it to affect you, because that environment personified an American dream. So you either were lucky enough to live in such an environment or you aspired to. But whether you did or not, there is John Carpenter ready to ruin it all with the presence of his terrifying, faceless, emotionless killer, popularly known as the Sheep. And you're quite right with the assertion about how it was creepy even though it was daylight. Time and time again we see posters and horror Facebook groups with cliched continuity banging on about the originality of Ari Aster making Midsummer creepy because, my goodness, it takes place during the day. Well, please give me a blanket so I can cover my head in shock and take a sleep from the surprise of that great achievement. But oh look, there's John Carpenter doing the very thing. The very first shot we see during the day of our white picket fence is accompanied by his creepy, uncanny piano sonata that brings that atmosphere to home. You know, we don't get into it gently. Right from the first note, something isn't right about the perfect daylight environment we have. Sorry, Ari Aster. Or should I say, sorry, Ari Aster fans.
Can't believe you found yet another video to bitch about Ari Aster in. Well done.
Actually, I'm doing this on behalf of our other co-host, Tom Staunton, who is on hand to deliver points of trivia, whose famous video with a very comic critique of Midsummer you can watch on this channel. On our channel, should I say. Yes, thank you, Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
And with a point of trivia, Tom tells us that John Carpenter produced his famous score, produced in a very rare 5/4 music time, a timing that he perfected with some learning from his father, who was also a musician, in just 3 days. 3 days to create a legendary soundtrack that every horror fan knows off by heart, unless they're a moron. Yeah. Did you like the music for Halloween?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's a classic tune now. It's played in like everything. But yeah, it's amazing. Like, I love it.
Which note was your favourite? B. Ah. Yes. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And from the spooky atmospheric building to the chilling, repetitive tones for when our killer sees the target and is approaching, especially in the chase sequence against Laurie Strode. It's chilling and was exquisitely ripped off by the composer for It Follows. But then so was the cinematography and so many other ideas by It Follows. I actually quite enjoyed It Follows.
Yeah, it was good.
It is essentially a kind of, it's so spiritualist in its facsimile rendition of Halloween that it could almost be an atheist in comparison. And I say that as someone that does like It Follows, but perhaps mostly for its imitation of Halloween. Something resplendent in its soundtrack and its wide-angled cinematography.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I can totally see it now.
Oh yeah. If you took away what Halloween brings to the table, It Follows would cease to exist. It's not to be too harsh on It Follows, but you know, it is an entertaining film.
Yeah.
So, you like the music in Halloween? Did you enjoy the performances? We have Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, as Lawrie.
Yep. And
oh yeah, they all began with L's. There was like Linda and Lindsay, wasn't it?
Yeah. The main characters are our final girl, Jamie Lee Curtis, and her two friends, probably called Lindsay and Linda, and Annie. One of which is played by P.J. Souls.
Oh yeah.
which is the character of Linda, who is a magnificent bully in 1976's Carrie, directed by Brian De Palma, which is, again, a stunning masterpiece of a horror film.
Yeah, it's amazing, and she was utterly detestable. It was
She
brilliant.
She was good. But to her credit, her performance is so different in Halloween that it was only relatively recently that I realised it was actually PJ Soles as well. Like Black Christmas, another great slasher film, the characters in Halloween have some interest, some spice, some humour to them.
And they just seemed like ordinary schoolgirls, really, like just ordinary friends. It felt completely believable that they'd all be buddies.
I think you mentioned there was a kind of dorkishness to them.
Yeah, they were totally kind of just, dorky, a bit awkward, not like nowadays, all the girls in like college films, they're always like looking perfect and very kind of pouty. And it's just nice to have what seemed like normal girls.
Yeah, there was a bit of humour to them. Things like that. And I quite liked, who was the actress that played the third friend then? We had PG Soles and Nancy Kai.
Keys, maybe?
And she played, we have one of the friends gets...
Do you mean Annie?
Yeah, who gets stuck in
the
a...
curly haired girl.
K-Y-E-S, Keys. Nancy Keys plays Annie, the third friend, and we have scenes where she gets trapped in the window. She's got a great attitude. It's really funny.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Great ass. Yeah. I mean, she does have a great ass as well. Yeah, to be fair. And like the slasher film Black Christmas, the characters have a quirkiness that is amusing. And the dialogue for the female characters was entirely written, I think, by Deborah Hill, who was a producer and John Carpenter's wife and collaborator. They would, unfortunately for them, separate only a year afterwards, but they would remain collaborators though. And John Carpenter himself wrote the dialogue for Dr. Loomis. And what did you think of Dr. Loomis?
Yeah, I thought he was really good. I think, his character was really important because we didn't need all this kind of loads of backstory or to see Michael Myers doing past stuff, because just showing that this psychiatric doctor was terrified and completely paranoid of what he's going to do was more than enough, really.
And what did you think of his performance?
Yeah, he did a really good performance. It was just really convincing.
And Donald Pleasance is effectively the only name in the film, and his wage was probably, I think, about $25,000. That's in a film with a budget of $300,000. John Carpenter himself was paid $10,000. So we'd had 2.5 times the director.
Wow.
As a point of reference, Jamie Lee Curtis was paid somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000. And although she wasn't a name, she is of course the daughter of Janet Leigh from Psycho, and Tony Curtis as well, the Hollywood star. So well connected, but still not a name in her own right. Though it doesn't hurt to have connections like that.
Yeah. But she was really talented in her own right, though. So she absolutely deserved the role, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But to stick on with Donald Pleasance, though, Dr. Loomis, and Donald Pleasance is a very experienced, was a very experienced, respected British actor, British character actor, famous for films like I think The Great Escape and many studio films. At this point, his career was in its twilight years, you could say, but he wasn't just doing anything though. He was still relatively choosy. By comparison, maybe a little bit like the career of Malcolm McDowell now, sometimes in B movies and whatnot, but still respected. The role of Dr. Loomis was offered to Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. These are two venerable British horror actors famous for their films with Hammer. And John Carpenter, as a horror fan, was clearly looking to get veterans from the films he watched growing up.
Yeah.
But they turned them down. Christopher Lee actually described his rejection of the role of Dr. Loomis as the greatest career mistake he ever made in his
Wow.
life, following the success of Halloween. After all, they would have been paid royalties as well as, but also for those artists being part of such a cultural phenomenon as Halloween became, we made a great thing. Donald Pleasance turned it down originally and was encouraged to reconsider the role offer by his daughter, who had become a massive fan of John Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13, largely on account of the music he had produced for that film, of which she was a fan, and she persuaded Donald Pleasance to give it another go. And Donald Pleasance was quite direct to John Carpenter about that. When he arrived, he kind of famously said, I don't know anything really about this film, I've barely looked at the script, but I need money to pay my alimony to my ex-wife, but my daughter seems to think you're a genius, so here I am. So, quite brutal, and one would assume they might have had a very difficult relationship, but whatever they did have, it did become, during the course of filming, a close friendship. And they became good friends, and Donald Pleasance would appear in 2 subsequent John Carpenter films. I think one of them being, what's it called? Something Darkness? Prince of Darkness. And, probably Halloween 3. No. Tom is on the trivia hunt, but Prince of Darkness is one of them. Some of you will already know this, and be like, So Jamie Lee Curtis. Now, you've always hated Jamie Lee Curtis, but has this film changed your mind?
What? Where did that come from?
You once said her name and punched a wall, saying, I wish this wall was Jamie Lee Curtis. And I was like...
I don't just go around punching walls. Believe it or not.
It's Escape from New York.
Escape from New York.
And
Prince of Darkness.
yes, he was also in Halloween 2, obviously.
Yes, Halloween 2, which was directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, was it? No, it won't be. He did that. He did Halloween 3. Tommy Lee Wallace, great, a really good horror director. Maybe we can't say great horror director.
Rick Rosenthal.
Yeah, Rick Rosenthal did Halloween 2. That was a bit of a disaster, that film, unfortunately. Quick follow-up. Tommy Lee Wallace worked with John Carpenter and was in the same band as John Carpenter, and would do Halloween 3 as director and the Stephen King's It TV miniseries
Cool.
as well with how can I forget the name?
What name?
Who?
Pennywise.
What, the actor?
Yeah.
Is that Tim Curry?
Tim Curry, that's right. Terrible forgetting that. And did you know,
Outrageous.
here's a little bit of trivia for you with Hex fans. Tim Curry very nearly was the voice of the Owlman for Lord of Tears. And so was Christopher Lee, in fact, but owing to illness could not partake, David Schofield eventually being the voice of the Owlman. So, Jamie Lee Curtis, what's your issue with Jamie Lee Curtis?
There is no issue with Jamie Lee Curtis. She's great.
So how did you resolve your issue with Jamie Lee Curtis?
There was no issue with Jamie Lee Curtis.
I see.
Yeah.
That's good. It's good that you've worked so hard to resolve the issue that
I've
you
repressed
feel,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good segue into the sexual repression that Laurie Strode's character has. Because our 2 friends are somewhat more liberated in this sphere since we see them getting up to all kinds of shenanigans.
Yeah.
John Carpenter, and there's some accusation for suggesting the virginal Laurie Strode is somehow spared because of her, supposed moral superiority, and whether the deaths of the other girls were as a result of their shameless slutdom. Was asked this point, and John Carpenter argued that was absolutely not the case, and that was not what he thought. He just assumed, young people like to have sex. What a striking supposition that might be. But he did make the remark that if one was to suggest, in his eyes, something so silly as a virginal Laurie Strode being spared for that reason, then one might also argue that her aggressive stabbing and killing of Michael Myers was a result of her expressed sexual frustration. Stab, stab, stab.
Is that your opinion?
That's John Carpenter to
I
quote.
know.
Yep.
To be fair, I thought of it more as like, oh, she doesn't get to go to the dance with Billy or Ben or whatever his name is. I was more like,
Ben Schaefer.
Oh, yeah, Ben Schaefer. But it just made me more sad. Not like, oh, she hasn't had sex yet, but more just like, oh, she doesn't get to go with Billy. I didn't think of it like, oh, she's a virgin, so she should live.
Ben Schaefer's named after one of John Carpenter's old friends from college.
Oh, really?
Just so you know.
Oh, thanks
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, it's kind of a. This is more of a hallmark of relatively modern film criticism, and you know that kind of aspect, right, where you're looking through the tea leaves for meaning, is way more the hallmark now, more and more and more, especially with the whole kind of pop culture, culture war nonsense. People like go into a kind of miasma of detail to try and find one grain of something that might relate to the thing they really want to talk about, which will be some, again, bullshit culture war stuff or whatever you see dominating pop culture at the moment. And then we all have to sit and read a review that's like an essay on capitalism or something. It's got fuck all to do with it. So, yeah, I can imagine John Carpenter being a little bit frustrated at folks looking to see if there is a kind of moral indictment against a type of person when all he's done is make a horror movie about evil.
Yeah.
And sure, they'll have meanings and things like that, but if John Carpenter himself isn't spending time in interviews or panels going on about those deep-seated meanings, then you know what? If the artist isn't intending it, then maybe
It's not been intended.
yeah, maybe you could just give it a rest, you know.
Yeah.
Close the book, Poindexter, you know.
Like, I kind of get it because it's become a cliche, so fine, but that's not actually his fault because he was one of the first people to create it. So, you know, it's not his fault everyone copied him.
Well, so yes, that's right. The film did spawn the genre known as the slasher, and so there's no confusion about what that means. Although there might be some argument about what it means. The slasher genre, effectively, we're just looking at sequential dispatching of characters, largely one by one, in isolated locations by our antagonist, in which our protagonist is normally the survivor, and as per the rules of narrative film, is usually played by someone portraying a character that the audience can relate to and be sympathetic with. Now that has largely resulted in the so-called final girl, which is typified by being this kind of nice, sometimes virginal style,
or innocent.
Innocent, yeah. But you know, if we're being honest, like most of us, if we were looking to make a new friend in a high school, which is where most of these films always seem to be set, our most likely friend might be someone that probably is, or our most hopeful friend might be someone that is nice, overly nice, friendly, amenable, kindly, blah, blah, blah. It's just standard filmmaking.
Yeah,
You
girl
know,
next door.
Yeah, okay, so like the asshole high school jock gets killed first, second, or whatever. You know, the really bitchy girl that has the topless scene gets killed third or whatever. The reason they're not often your leads is because those characters have been made larger than life and caricatured.
Yeah, a bit hard to relate to them, really.
Yeah, they don't get as much screen time, so they have to be a bit larger than life.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, if we got to know them better, we'd see nicer, more sensitive sides. They would evolve more into the main character, the type. But anyway, within that framework for sequential dispatching of characters, you can have slow burns that take time to build some story and atmosphere and then have it unfold. Films like Halloween or Ridley Scott's Alien are good examples of that. And even Wes Craven's film, The Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one as well. But during that time, the most prolific number of slashes that were made tended to focus more on the titillation, softcore sex, and the more extreme, violent dispatches the spectacle of the deaths, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that commonality lent towards exploitation cinema more, and is really what the slasher subgenre was more seen as. So you could have a film like Alien be a science fiction thriller. It's really a slasher, but it wouldn't be called that, because to call it that would be to denigrate the film. As slashers became more associated with films such as the Friday the 13th sequels or exploitation horror films like Pieces, for example.
Speaking of A Nightmare on Elm Street, Robert Englund was a leaf spreader on Halloween.
Yes, Tom has just given us some essential trivia to let us know that Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street, had the job of spreading leaves along the set streets for Halloween.
What?
Yeah. It's actually amazing how small that world is.
Yeah.
The amount of people that, yeah. I can't believe that.
Yeah, that's great.
So we love the performances.
Yeah.
You know, we love the music, and what did you think of the direction and cinematography for Halloween?
Yeah, I really liked it. I liked that there were kind of lots of daytime shots but still made them really creepy with the kind of cinematography. We're also talking about like kind of not subliminal images, but just things you might associate with something else to make them even creepier, even though it's not that. So like when Michael Myers pulls up in the car outside and is stalking the little boy, it kind of reminds us of like child abduction, and that's
Child abduction.
yeah, which is very creepy.
Well,
And clever that they did that.
No, you're quite right. These are very important subconscious aspects or signifiers that associate our antagonist, exactly as you say, with child abduction. It's actually a vital part of what contributes to this oppressive atmosphere and dark cloud around the character of Michael Myers to make him so much more than the kind of ordinary slasher antagonists that would come after him. And it wasn't always what he would do, like killing or anything, but just that kind of thing.
Yeah, just subtle hints of possibly something else, but not.
In that sequence that you give as an example, the cinematography shows us a POV shot from the back seat of the car. So camera guy is behind Michael Myers, and it gives us the POV of what would look like a likely child abductor who might open the car door, snatch the kid off the sidewalk and pull them in and speed off. Mm-hmm. This kind of visual language and these kind of ideas we actually see a few times in Halloween. And it's interesting that it paints an association with Michael Myers that's much more close to serial killers that are human.
Reality.
Real life crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, the supernatural aspect is alluded to, but only confirmed right at the very end. Mm-hmm. And people forget that with Halloween, that it really is a serial killer thriller until the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then that switch is what makes it so devastating.
Yeah, such
and
a
powerful.
clever twist.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it is, you're right, exactly, a twist.
Mm.
So we're covering quite a few things there. We like the script, we like the performances, we like the music. Cinematography is worth of note here.
Definitely.
Because it's not just It Follows that rips it off. John Carpenter creates a unique and very consistent style of cinematography that relies on a very heavy use of especially wide-angled shots, using very, very wide lenses, almost to the point of creating distortion on the sides of the frame, so that we get a very wide sense of space in the suburban streets.
Yeah, it's pretty isolating. If there's a small character in the middle of the frame, they look tiny.
If for anyone in doubt, just watch the first 2 minutes or minute of It Follows and compare it to any of the street cinematography we see from Halloween, and you'll get an idea. Of course, in It Follows, the director would call that a homage, and to be fair, that probably is relatively fair to a point, but I think he pushes his luck there. But, but if you disagree with me, you can tell me in the comments, but I'll delete them, and you can also just fuck off. So, yeah, I think we're covering a bit of Halloween.
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about what happened afterwards. John Carpenter had originally intended for Halloween to be a franchise, where each film would be a different story. Halloween 3 lives up to its name in that respect, only because Halloween 2 was such an unmitigated disaster. And they rushed to get John Carpenter back, and were like, please, anything you want, whatever you want. And he's like, right, well, I've got the weirdest shit ever for Halloween 3.
I love it. I love Halloween 3. I love what he came up with. It's so creepy.
I really like Halloween 3 as
Yeah.
well. I think it's great. And then they were like, no, okay. Let's just bring back the guy. We tried that.
Yeah, it was nice while it lasted.
And now you have the new Halloween films, each competing to be more mediocre than the last. Halloween 1 was a one-time deal, and I think John Carpenter knew that, and he was smart enough to say bye to that right away. But if you want to enjoy another fantastic John Carpenter slasher that relies on atmosphere and also stars Jamie Lee Curtis as well, then do check out The Fog, which also has a spectacular soundtrack and was produced only a few years after Halloween. In fact, what year was The Fog released?
I think it's 1980, I'll just check.
1980 maybe. So if we were to give, well, I would give Halloween 10 coconuts. That's why I think there's, I think it's an expertly crafted tale of suspense. It uses its limited resources spectacularly well, and has created a film that has stood the test of time. What about you? How many coconuts would you give?
Oof. I would go for 9.5 coconuts, but very nearly a 10 because it's freaking awesome.
We don't do halves here. After the great half coconut debacle me and Tom had, we could put you down for a 10 as well. Or do you want to be a 9?
Maybe I'm a 9 now.
Yeah, and then we could spend the rest of our series finding which slasher you would give 10 coconuts to.
Yeah, the ultimate quest.
So what is it going to be?
Fine, it'll be at 10.
10 coconuts, eh? Wow. So folks, what would you say then to folks that are young like you, and they're like, Halloween, 1970, I don't know, it seems too old, it can't be scary. What would you tell them?
Well, I'd say it's aged really well. I mean, the acting style is pretty different, so if you're not obsessed with really kind of standoffish, like, you know, disinvested acting, then you'll love it because it's got very naturalistic acting. Yeah, it's great.
How about folks? You've heard it from Megan Tremethick. So
That sounded genuine.
well, I mean, I might get like a music fanfare sound effect on the video.
You won't.
Yeah, it's hard. It takes time to do that. So folks, I hope you enjoyed our video. A big thank you to all our Patreon supporters. And please like, share and subscribe for more Channel Hex content. Thank you for enduring my cynical and embittered rendition of film critique for Halloween. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.